With that, I think we should move to the gay rights discussion before we run out of time. So right now, Perry versus Schwarzenegger is going on in my home state of California. It's a case that seeks to repeal or challenge the constitutionality of Prop 8, which instated a constitutional amendment that bans gay marriage. I know there's some debate among the gay rights community regarding the timing of that case and whether or not it's a positive or a negative to be seen fighting the law right now. Any opinions on that?
Well, basically, there are some sects within the gay rights advocacy community that feel like they're on the defensive right now. They're having to tackle ballot initiatives like Prop 8, and they're taking, a lot of them feel like the state-by-state method of supporting gay marriage is taking too long. So there's this particular group within California that's challenging the Supreme Court. Challenging Prop 8 in the Supreme Court. It's not actually there yet, but there's some debate within the community as to whether this is actually a good thing, because there's a lot of risk involved. If it so happens that this action fails, it sets a very bad precedent. If it fails and they want to tackle it again, they have to wait a while, because that's the way the Supreme Court works.
You also sort of alluded to, there was preceding the actual announcement of the case, there was a lot of controversy within the LGBT community about actually pursuing this method, because, like Bruce said, it's very. If the Supreme Court does see this case, there's a very likely chance that they'll ultimately defend Prop 8's constitutionality, given the current makeup of the court. But now that it's actually happened, now that the case has been put in, I think you see, as soon as that happened, you saw sort of a tidal wave within the community of support for this initiative, which is just how things tend to happen in a community as diverse as ours. It's very hard before things are finalized to come to agreement on anything. But once someone takes the initiative and starts moving forward with it, the amount of visible dissent is quickly lost. I think now we're just sort of, hopefully, or we're just all sort of hoping that it works out. It's going to take 2 or 3 years really to get to the Supreme Court, so it'll be interesting to see what the makeup looks like at that point. But you definitely saw an increase of support in the LGBTQ and ally community, I should say, as well, when it was finally announced that the case was going to be put up to the First Circuit of the courts in California.
I just want to chime in quickly, kind of going back to your question earlier, Bruce, about if don't ask, don't tell, if that should be a priority. I think that all these things, are linked, and that's why it should be a priority. This is about making sure that everyone is afforded the same rights and everyone is living comfortably. And I think that this issue in California is definitely related to the military, and definitely related to gender-neutral housing at Columbia. So I think that's why we need to keep all of these things in perspective and make sure that rights all across the board in every single, sector are taken care
of. Bruce, you mentioned, you said that the gay rights community was playing defense because of Prop 8. But within the past 2 years, there have been at least 6 states that have enacted or legalized gay marriage in New Hampshire, Iowa, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and actually in our capital, Washington, D.C. So it seems to me that, in actuality, the gay rights community has been experiencing a slew of victories. It seems to me it's only a matter of time before gay marriage becomes
But the thing is, I don't think that's an honest characterization, because at the same time, there's been a lot of backward movement in places that you wouldn't expect. Like in New York, in the state legislature, they shut down a bill to legalize gay marriage. In a place as liberal as New York, if not in New York, why would it ever happen in Texas or more conservative areas of the country?
Well, I mean, here's the other thing, is that we have to, like, one of the things for me is that we're 0-31 when it comes to ballot initiatives. And we've actually had 2 more states adopt same-sex marriage, California and Maine, and both of those were repealed through ballot initiatives that were characterized, I mean, if you look at the rhetoric on both sides in those campaigns, I mean, it was just completely awful. The conservative movement was mostly arguing that if we allow same-sex marriage in these states, then, this form of marriage that is so abhorrent is going to be taught to our children in our schools. And that's countered with the argument about equal rights and about, this is family and what is wrong with supporting families of any makeup. And so I think that, yes, you're right, we have had more success in having states like Iowa and Connecticut and New Hampshire adopt same-sex marriage. It's been promising to me, at least, that both Vermont and New Hampshire did it through the legislature rather than through the courts. But I don't think that there has been a steady march towards same-sex marriage across the United States. There has been a lot of backlash. And, a lot of people say, well, why don't we wait? Why not? Because there's been a lot of studies that have shown that younger Americans support gay marriage at a rate much higher than their older counterparts. But first of all, if you look at kind of how those are distributed across states, not all younger people support gay marriage, and that's just a fact. And then secondly, why should we have to wait until the generation before us kind of passes on and kind of we come up? That's not how these things are run. We win these by really fighting and pushing for them, kind of moving along further. So I think that's kind of a question that I have, is why should we have to wait?
Well, the reason maybe you could wait on this particular issue of Perry versus Schwarzenegger is because if you make the wrong move, then you have to wait even longer.
Yeah.
I would say, sort of to piggyback off of Kate's comment, is just that the very concept that we're putting up the minorities' rights to ballot initiatives is very frustrating. It seems very anachronistic, considering that we're almost 80 years out of this of the high point of Jim Crow laws, and when those were being put up to ballot initiatives, and it seems if it were really framed that way, I think that you'd have people looking at this differently. That it's maybe a dangerous precedent to go back to putting minority rights up to a public initiative, and it's very hard to make it so that gay rights wins on the ballot, because ultimately everyone doesn't vote. And it's very hard to convince people who are in support of gay rights to go to the ballot, but aren't necessarily personally affected by it, to go to the ballot box, because people it's kind of in our country, we just don't vote unless we feel like we really have to. And so for people who are motivated out of religion to go vote, there's a much higher response rate than people who are just, motivated out of, well, that sounds good. And that's really the essential problem.
And I think, if you look at the Proposition 1 in Maine, what calculus ended up being was, college students, which have historically low numbers of turnout in an off year, which was 2009 was an off year, versus a more organized, religious-based group that was kind of going out to vote. And I don't want to characterize all religious groups as being anti-gay marriage, because there is a strong section of religious groups that are for gay marriage and have been fighting for it. If you look at kind of who have submitted amicus briefs recently in the court cases, both the one we've been talking about here and kind of moving forward, there are gay rights groups and religious groups. There are religious groups that support gay marriage and that fight against it. I think one side of that gets a lot more media attention, and I think that's why a lot of times we characterize religious groups as being against gay marriage. But if we look at the kind of advancements that Episcopalian and other sects of Christianity have made, along with kind of the Reform Reconstructionists and some murmurs in the conservative Jewish movement, I think we can see that it's not uniform across all religious groups either, which I think we need to keep in mind.